Welcome back to Body Talk with Becks. This week I get to interview Paul Kerensa. He is a stand-up comedian and freelance writer on lots of different BBC shows. And he was born with bladder exstrophy. And I was really excited for this episode because I've never gotten to speak with a male who has bladder exstrophy and hear what types of struggles they go through that are different than females. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in here.
Very good.
There we go.
Okay.
So I've been really looking forward to talking to you for a couple of reasons. One is that I haven't yet heard from a male perspective for bladder exstrophy. Actually, I just realized my microphone's like way far away.
There you go. That's quality.
Is that better?
That's great. That
Okay.
sounds like you're there. Great.
Sorry about that.
That's fine.
So yeah, I haven't heard any male perspectives on the bladder exstrophy yet, and we have such different anatomy. I'm sure there's so many different things that for you I didn't have to deal with and vice versa. And then secondly, I am really interested also in hearing, just because the experience in different countries, different treatment plans. And, I was talking to the girl in Scotland and hers was so different from what we were doing here, just in terms of like availability, even of, pharmaceuticals and things like that. So
yeah, of course. Yeah. I heard Kirstine's episode. It was a great listen. So good on you for getting this stuff out there. It's a great thing to do.
Yeah, it was really great chatting with her. I liked chatting with her a lot. Yeah, so those are my two main reasons why I was really excited to talk to you. And then I've noticed a lot of parents of bladder exstrophy patients kind of around my age don't know that their kid is going to have bladder exstrophy. Was it the same for yours?
Yeah, so with my parents, I was born in the late 1970s. My parents didn't have a clue this was going to happen, surprise. And out I came, I guess, essentially clutching my bladder, which is not ideal. And I was born in Cornwall in the UK, which is like the far southwest end, which is quite rural. So it's all sort of farmland and, very narrow country lanes and things. So I was sort of taken straight up to London in I think it was in an ambulance for a 6-hour drive or something to where they thought someone could help properly. But yeah, it was a surprise back then. And I guess for many people, it still is, certainly.
Wow. So they didn't have any idea at all that anything would be wrong, because sometimes they know like something's not quite, they're not sure what it is, but something's not going to be right.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, I mean, it's funny because my parents, I've got a good relationship with them. We talk a lot, a couple of times a week, but they don't generally like to talk much about all of this stuff. And I think it's something that they probably, still are. They don't like to look back, I think, in too many ways. And I know that they went through a lot, and they're very laughy and jokey, my parents, But I know and I notice that whenever we sort of go talk about these sort of days, because I had, I think, a good couple of 100 operations before the age of 5. I had times I was in hospital for a couple of months on end up at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London. For that time we were living not in Cornwall anymore, but just outside London, but maybe a couple of hours from London. So I was missing school, and they would take it in shifts to come and stay with me in the ward and all that sort of thing. So it was a big ask, your parents, so they'll do these things, but it must have had a huge impact on them. But we haven't, we don't talk about it loads because I just know that it's something they went through at the time, and I kind of always feel like they're the ones who kind of suffered, I think, because I have few memories of it, and generally my memories of hospital back then are mostly kind of fun. I still have moments of realizing that times that particularly weren't fun, or in for a long time away from school, away from friends, but I made friends in hospital. So You know, you as a child, as a young child especially, you make do, you know, and actually I kind of feel like they are the ones who really went through it rather than me in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine watching your kid go through something like that, and you just, you want to make it better for them. It's a
Yeah,
lot
of
to
course.
process.
Yeah, and especially because, like, you know, nowadays we have Facebook and the internet and things like that. The world shrinks. You have communities. You could get a bit more help and support. But yeah, back then they didn't have any way of accessing much information apart from really those overheard conversations of other people they would meet on the wards. So I know they made friends with 2 or 3 other families who I guess were there. I don't know whether my ward was particularly a ward for bladder exstrophy people, or just in time you start to pick up on who else has the same sort of problem, same situation, same condition. But I do know, 2 or 3 people who were about the same age as me, and we grew up together in that sense, just in and out of hospital. But it was that weird thing. I know the community of us at the start when we were in a lot, and they sort of fixed us to whatever degree that is. And then as we became older children and things and teens and stuff, I think, you know, my mum kept in touch with a couple of other mums and things, but it drifts off and you have your own lives, you know, and it goes on from there. So I do feel like the hospital era for me was very early on. I go back now every year for checkups and things, but mostly it's one day, it's in, it's out again. And apart from, you know, I self-catheterize on a daily basis. Well, not just daily, you know, several times a day. It'd be odd if I just did it once a day and that was it. But apart from that, that's really how it affects my life now. But I'm married, I've got 2 kids, and I go about my daily business. Apart from having to plan toilets out and about, that's generally how it affects my life. But yeah, the hospital days feel like it's long and distant ago now.
Yeah. Well, do you want to just take us through chronologically what you can remember?
I suppose, yeah, I should have this written down, shouldn't I? Because I can remember very little. But I'm 43 now. I hesitate because I never remember. I think I'm 43. I've reached that point. I never quite know. I'm early 40s.
You stop counting at a certain point.
Yeah, don't. Exactly. 21 again, you know. But so I was born, like I say, in Cornwall, 1979. And I had a cholecystoplasty when I was 5. And I had various long word based conditions before that, bilateral inguinal hernias and things that make sense to other people that don't make full sense to me. So it was all of those sorts of things, early days, you know. But I was in and out of hospital quite a lot. I think I had a couple of 100 operations back then. And yeah, then really it was just about school and dealing with that in school. So my bladder was born, you know, it's exstrophy, Greek, is it, or Latin trophy? I think it's Greek, isn't it? Out of body experience. We think of the soul and things like that as out of body, but the bladder, much less glamorous. But it was born on the outside, and I had an indwelling catheter for I think the first 8 years of my life, something like that. Changed every month, I guess, by my mum. And then when I was about 8, I remember she sat me down and she said, by the way, that's now going and you're going to now self-catheterize now and you need to learn how to self-catheterize. And I thought, what? No. You resist, you know, largely just because change, you know, the change is not a nice thing. And you have to move forward, didn't you? So I had to learn how to self-catheterize. And then it was then the challenges became more about school and how you walk around with a bag, you know, it's a small little, I think I borrowed my dad's shaver bag, which invites more questions than it answers, really. Suddenly you've got to explain to your school friends, or I say friends, school bullies, enemies, why you have this bag with you, you know. And yeah, it was just a case of doing that, getting through. You know, I wasn't particularly sporty, but I think I kind of used my bladder exstrophy to get out of sport. You know, I think after a while I realised the teachers didn't like to ask questions about this icky bladder-based thing. So I realised I could just get off games and sport for my entire school career. So, you know, you got to learn to work with these conditions, haven't you? Make it work for you. So that was that, and then teenage life and 20s, I suppose, early 20s, then it's about, well, I suppose, no, actually, first of all, it's about social life. Then it's about either going away, I don't know, camping and stuff like that, or then pubs and socialising and parties and how that works, and like alcohol, and realised, like, you know, how do I catheterise when I'm also trying to have a social life? And all those little tips, like, you know, you'd go to the loo, you go to the toilet, and I take a bit longer than my friends. And after a while, you realise this is when they start to notice that you take a while longer. And I'd come back from the toilet in a pub, always on my phone, as if I've just had a phone call, and people didn't ask questions. And then over a while, friends go, "You always get phone calls when you go to the gents' toilet. What's that all about?" So it's all that stuff. And then it's sort of dating and working out how to address that and when to talk about your bladder problems. Our first date is weird, but then if you leave it to the fifth date, that's also weird. So I found second, third date is kind of the sweet spot for that. It's all that sort of tricky. And then after the dating thing for a decade or more, I met my wife, and she was a nurse. I didn't meet her through her being my nurse, but it just meant that she didn't find the stuff icky, and that was great. Just finding someone, because I had girlfriends who did find it icky, and you think, oh, okay, it is going to be tricky. It's tricky if it's icky. But meeting, my wife was great because she just understood it. Even if she didn't fully understand it, she was interested enough in it to get it and didn't dismiss it. Didn't dismiss life and a relationship and things because of it. And then it became about kids, and can we have kids? Because that's a big question, of course, for many people. And we looked into IVF and ICSI and all of these medical things, because I was always told it would be tricky to have kids. And at the time as well, it depends how advanced you want to get down this road, but we're talking around the issue for a start anyway. I always found it rather tricky to produce much that was enabling one to have children, put it that way. So because I had operations and things like that, and a lot of pulling around and in the inside of things. So but then actually we were so lucky, but also we had to really push for medical help. We sort of we got a psychosexual counsellor on the NHS, which was amazing. I think the funding was withdrawn soon after, so we were kind of lucky with that. But we really pushed, both with my experts in London, our local doctor as well, on both sides of it, two-pronged attack. And we got this psychosexual counsellor. They saw us for a bunch of sessions, kind of just relaxed us a bit and stopped us panicking, and that helped, I think it's fair to say. And we now have 2 children, and here we are. I suppose that's it in a nutshell. I've rambled on for a long time there, but that's 4.5 decades in 4.5 minutes. There you are.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that they had said that you would have trouble having kids, because they always tell the females that we're going to have trouble conceiving. So right. I think it's interesting. Right. It's kind of the same for guys as well.
I guess, I don't know. I don't want to. I'm not medical enough to know whether they just don't know or just say they've been put, because I suppose the doctors we see now, I don't know about you, but the doctor I see now has sort of inherited me and inherited the fact that all my surgery has been done by doctors decades ago. So, and I guess we're all individual cases, and there's not like a one-size-fits-all answer, I suppose, to a lot of these things. So I wouldn't be surprised if doctors that we speak to now look at our files and go, well, it's going to be tricky because we don't know enough about what's happened here. But I suppose I'm sure. I'm not medical. There's probably medical people listening to this going, no, that's completely not the case. They can look at your notes, they can realise these things and work out exactly what can or can't be done. But I do know that people with exstrophy have had kids, and I know people who haven't had kids and haven't been able to have kids. I know men who've had a lot of issues in sex and things like that or just relationships, so there are a lot of hurdles basically, and some hurdles you can get over quite easily, some are a lot bigger and trickier, and whether it's social, physical, physiological, medical, urological, I don't know. It's we're all different in that sense, and good luck to all of us. But I think it's all, there's hope in all those areas, I think. And I would always say, keep pushing away. If you want that family or that relationship or that solution to, I don't know, continence, whatever, sometimes you've got to keep pushing with different doctors and knock on a few doors and ask for help and reach out and find these communities on Facebook and things like that. And podcasts like this are good on you for talking about this stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, I think maybe it's one of those things where maybe there's just not enough research out there on that specific element of bladder exstrophy. And I think a lot of the research is really focused on how to handle when they're a kid and when they're first born. And there's not a whole lot of research that I've seen on the later years.
100% agree with that. I certainly found that when I was a child, and then like I don't know, I don't know what when adolescence kicks in, but when I was I was suddenly under an adolescent doctor, and I always felt that those checkups were about the bladder and about, is that working? Do we need to change anything there? Are there any leaks, gaps, infections, those things? Which, they were enough challenges there. I've had infections galore. I've had peritonitis twice. I've had a couple of times when it was kind of touch and go on the operating table. And some pretty severe mortal threats in that sense. But once you fix that, I think that does have to be the primary sort of stuff. But then, the next level then has to be dealt with. And I think they're getting better at that, I think. I've spoken and met with some great clinical, nurse specialists and things like that. I think they're getting better. But I think you're right. It's certainly not their primary motive to make sure we can all sort of function as, social, marital, sexual beings, whatever it might be. They just want to, there's a lot more focus, perhaps right, I suppose, on making sure that we live and our organs work. But it's tricky.
That's pretty important too.
Yeah. Can we have it all? Is that too much to ask for the lot? Is that too much to ask? I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you mind kind of talking to us about all of the medical things when you were a kid?
Yeah. So, what do you want to know? See what I can remember.
All of it, whatever you can remember.
All of it. I'm trying. Do you know what? As we speak, I'm trying to find. I've got a PowerPoint thing I did for a medical presentation, and I was trying to find it, and I can't find it. I've got it on my computer somewhere. Basically, my medical CV, my medical backstory, which is beyond my mind, and it's that odd thing of reaching back into the dim and distant past and trying to remember things that I was told that hadn't happened. Right, I found a list. I've got a list. Here we go. Right. So, if this means anything to anybody, I don't know. For 3 months, I had bladder closure, repair of these bilateral inguinal hernias, which sounds important. 18 months repair of epispadias, 4 years bilateral osteotomies of the pelvis. Oh, I think that's when I was in for the. I had my legs up on the in plaster basically for 6 weeks. Couldn't move out of bed for 6 weeks.
Wow.
That was the big one. And I was on a TV show. I've got the video clip here. I was on a TV show for the BBC when they were doing a day in the life of Great Ormond Street Hospital, and that's when they filmed that. So it's me in like 1983, I guess, doing my schoolwork in hospital, and just kind of there for a couple of months. That was my time there for a while, and
wow.
And then, but 5 years, age of 5 years, I had cholecystoplasty, fixing the bladder, patching it all up with bits of my bowel were sort of attached. I sometimes say that it was because it's a bladder I wasn't born with technically, but it is now my bladder. I call it my step bladder. So that kind of works. But that was the main stuff. And then started catheterizing at the age of 8. When I was 23, that was one of the big ones. And actually, I will shout about this because I was 23. It was, as we call it in Britain, Boxing Day. Do you have Boxing Day in the US? It's sort of the day after Christmas, the 26th of December.
I mean, it's on the calendar, but I don't think I've ever met anyone that does anything for it.
No, it's just it used to be Boxing Day sales, but then Amazon took over, so that's not even a thing. But, it's the day after Christmas, lots of turkey sandwiches and food. And my parents went out to a neighbour's lunch thing. I was just feeling a bit like, I think I've had too much turkey. I'm going to stay here. And then while they were out, so I was 23, I was at home alone. And by the time they got back, I was writhing on the floor. Never known agony like it. Turns out it was a rupture in the bladder. It was peritonitis. So basically the stuff in the bladder, the urine, was mixing with the stuff out the bladder, blood, and that's not a good mix. So,
oh my gosh.
Went to hospital, they patched it up, and thankfully in time. But I do know of this happening. It's a threatening thing, and if I'd left it half a day or a day, they probably wouldn't have, I probably wouldn't be here now. So it was a pretty massive thing. So I chat about that because people who have bladder repair, I presume that the technology is always getting better and better, and that it's more reliable than it ever was. But I guess it's a wear and tear thing, and if a man-made fix like that is going to have, potentially after a while, I was always told, be careful playing extreme sports and rugby and things like that. If you get a kick to the belly, basically, it's delicate, and I can see that then because that I had that rupture there, and it doesn't mean that you instantly got a massive problem, but just be aware. And ever since then, if I get a pain or whatever, I got to listen to my body and realise that sometimes I've got to go to the doctors. Most of the time it's a twinge, and it's a UTI, just an infection or something, which is still nasty, or cystitis or whatever. But I just need to listen for my body and not just ride through it, take some painkillers and go to bed and think it'd be fine. Just work out when it's serious, and then act on it, I guess, is my tricky lesson from that. But yeah. Oof.
That's scary.
So that's that really. Yeah, it is. It's scary, but I would say the hope I kind of try and give with it is I try and be positive where possible. So I only want to scare in a good way, saying, look, just listen to these things if these things happen. And maybe that was a one-off and a rarity. I don't know, but I just think, we have it's also, there's always that balance as well, I guess. And I've met people with exstrophy who want to forget all about it, and they go, I just want to live my life. I don't want to be defined by my condition. I want to go on and do my thing. I want to ignore it completely, and I fully respect that. Then I know other people who dwell on it a lot, and every day of their life they're thinking about it and they are defined by it. And I suppose I try and pick a bit of a middle path where I don't want to be held back by it, but I also make sure I want to just listen out for those twinges and aches and pains and things. Although now I'm in my 40s, aches and pains and twinges, my knees are going, what can I tell you? That's just age, but there you are.
Yeah. So now it's defining what is just aging pains versus...
Exactly. I know the bladder pains now. That's all right. I know that one now. There you are.
I think we learned to detect those at a pretty early age.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, most of my general life now in terms of the bladder stuff it's just about the catheters and things like that. And I've sort of... the way they adapt and change, you get these new ones now in little bags and things, which feels more hygienic. I used to get a lot more UTIs and problems like that. So yeah, I used to have all these little fixes. Like I had a belt, which I'm still wearing now actually, with a zip in it, and it's a money belt, so you can store money in it, but actually if you get the right ones, it's the perfect size for a catheter. So that was great to be able to walk around always knowing around my waist I have an emergency catheter. So
that's awesome. That's really
things
cool.
Like that. It's nice.
Like your little secret pouch for all your stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And actually this one, because I now use the little sort of ones in little bags that are sealed and more hygienic, the one in my belt I've actually not used for years now. In fact, I should probably get rid of it because it's probably long past its use by date. But it's always been nice little comfort blanket to just know it's there, so
just in case.
Nice.
Yeah. How did they used to arrive then, if they weren't in little individual packages?
Well, I used to have, in fact still got some I do use here, just long, they're kind of in a pouch, yeah, but it'd be a long one, a centimetre and an inch or so wide and 20 inches long or something, and that would fit in the belt fine. But the new ones I get now are all little. Well, I'll show you one here. I know this is an audio medium, but you can see, and maybe you can help me define it. But this is my new catheter now. What would you call this? It looks like a little party bag at the end of a child's birthday party, And what's great is that they are completely sealed, so there's nothing getting in, nothing getting out. You open it up, and it's all in a little protective sheath, and therefore my fingers are not touching anything that's going in me, which is a good philosophy in life, I suppose.
Wow, that's really cool. I think we used to get the ones that were really long as well then. I haven't seen those new pouches before. Well,
also, the other thing is I spent a good 15 years or so having just the same catheter all the time, never thinking there was a choice. We don't get catheter shops on the high street, but more's the pity. And then one day when my catheter company got in touch and said, oh, by the way, we're discontinuing that catheter, I just thought, what? My life's over. How can you... This is my catheter. It's the only catheter. I didn't even know there was an option to have a different one. And they went, oh, yeah, no, there are other ones you can choose from. We'll send you a selection of our other ranges. But you have other ranges? I had no idea. So suddenly I was auditioning catheters. And only last week, a catheter company sent me one of their new top-of-the-range whiz-bang catheters that go faster stripes and, all this sort of stuff. So... it's worth knowing there are other options out there. Whether or not you have access to it, of course, depends on your healthcare system and all of these other factors. But they are out there somewhere, these options and choices and things.
That's really neat. That's definitely different from here. I don't know if they have options here. It was just whatever the insurance company would send us. They
there's
pretty
that,
much
isn't it?
decided for you, this is what you need.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. And in fact, the new ones that I got, the one I just showed you there, for example, when I first had it, I thought, cool, that looks... Well, my first thought was, that looks expensive. And of course, I'm very lucky that here in Britain, we got, well, you know, we have the NHS, whether that's lucky or not depends on your view of it. But it's all I can order them, and as long as they've got a deal with the NHS, it doesn't make any difference. And so I remember I first said to my GP, like, well, would you rather I go with this one or that one? You know, I don't want you to feel that I'm going for the executive, you know, the really fancy one, when actually you think, oh, that other one was fine. And they're like, have whatever, it costs the same to us, it doesn't make any difference. So it's kind of a level playing field in that sense. But that's here, and that's for now. I mean, who knows, 5 years time if we'll even have an NHS like we currently know. I won't get political, but anyway, that's you know, you never know, do you?
So you mentioned you used to live in Cornwall. Did they move closer to the hospital because of your bladder exstrophy, or was there other reasons that brought you?
Well, no, I not that I know of. My dad's work moved, but I do think there was an underlying factor. Like, you know, they were having to drive 6 hours to the hospital, and especially, you know, now I have it once a year, but back then it was a lot more regular. You know, it's a few times a year. My dad was from South London, so I know they used to, when we used to live in Cornwall, my parents would stay at my grandparents' house in London and things like that, just to kind of make it all work. But then my brother, you know, he's 4 years younger than me. I'm well aware there's issues there in terms of him feeling like the forgotten sibling, and that still is, you know, that rumbles on to this day. I think that I have sibling guilt that he was sort of left alone down in Cornwall not alone, but with his Cornish grandparents, while my parents took me up to London to stay with my London-based grandparents. So it was a case of hopping around the country, I think, until we all settled really where we are now. I'm in Guildford in Surrey, which is just on the outskirts of London now, or just outside London. So yeah, settled here really. And it is handy. We live actually, you know, an hour from London, but actually it's a 10-minute walk to our local hospital here. And one of the reasons I like where I currently am is, you know, not just for that, but if the kids fall over and have an accident or something, I like hospitals. I like being near a hospital, you know, so that's a good thing to be.
You don't have, what is it called, like anxiety around hospitals and doctors?
I like them. I think, generally speaking, you know, almost all of them are there to do good things. The ones who aren't, you know, they'll be found out. But no, I've had so many operations. I always feel like whenever I go into hospital for an operation or anaesthetic or anything, I always feel like I have to say, like, don't worry, you don't have to do the whole routine with me about I'm fine, you know, with all this stuff. Probably there's a bit of me still feeling a little bit dodgy about it. But no, I generally am going, yeah, this is a positive thing because it's helping us out, which is why, you know, in the pandemic and all that sort of thing, suddenly the hospital not being necessarily a safe place to go to or being overwhelmed was sort of alien to me. That was odd, because that's always the sanctuary, that's the place you can go, and suddenly to find like, oh no, you don't want to come here, that was weird. So yeah, that's my hospital philosophy anyway.
Yeah, I could see how that would be weird with that change. Was there any difference in availability of your catheter supplies during the pandemic?
No, well, I think briefly there was a couple of things like, you know, just order a bit sooner if you need to, that sort of thing. But that was okay. I did actually, I was chatting with someone who works for a catheter company. I won't say which one in case I don't think I'm divulging anything I shouldn't. But this is about 3 months ago probably, and I did say to them, like, are there any issues I should be knowing about in terms of where you get your catheters from, in terms of like international, you know, shipping and that sort of stuff, thinking about Russia and Ukraine, let alone Brexit as well, because, you know, we've currently got queues of lorries at the border and all, you know, it's not as easy as it was to get things across the world maybe. And yeah, this chap who works for this catheter company was sort of saying, oh no, it's all fine, but they said we get our supplies from a few different countries, and they're looking into options. And I think about, okay, well, if we can't get it via that route that involves a Chinese airline, maybe we need to look at, you know, developing that relationship with that other country and things. So I'm sure clever business people are doing clever things, but I did ask the question and I was reassured, although it did make me think, oh yeah, these supply chains, they are potentially fragile, aren't they? So I think it's good that these companies are looking into these things, making sure we're self-sufficient and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's lots of moving parts. Definitely above our pay grade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not here to solve that, thankfully. But we can. But trust, it's okay. You can trust and rely. Just make sure you've got a few. Yeah.
Yeah. So you went to a regular school.
Yes.
Do you homeschool at all, or you just were able to go to regular school all throughout?
Yeah, my parents couldn't wait to get rid of me, so no, I was never homeschool was never a thing. It was always regular school, and we had a school nurse and all that sort of thing, which is very helpful to know. So I could go and use the special lavatory that other children couldn't. But of course, then that came with its own issues of like suddenly you're singled out for being the different guy. Why do you get that treatment, all that sort of thing? So there's all that stuff. But I mean, in hindsight, I look back. I was picked on by a few people. But I look back though and go, actually, if I weren't picked on from a bladder, I was a guy with red hair and glasses. They'd have found something else, So, and I see other people I knew at school who, there's always it's a jungle, isn't it? You get through all that stuff, and it was mostly fun. I've got good friends from my school days who I'm still good friends with, and in fact some of them know about my bladder stuff, but some of them I've known for 30 years and only recently found out one or two had absolutely no idea that I had anything wrong with the bladder. And I thought, we must have been to the pub together several hundred or thousand times, and you've not even noticed that I always spend 5 to 10 minutes in the toilets. But yeah, they're not paying attention, clearly. But I don't shout about it a lot, but at the same time I've definitely mentioned it a few times, so what can I say?
Yeah, you don't necessarily hide it from anyone as well as you don't necessarily talk about it.
Well, exactly. And in fact, like my job is I'm a stand-up comedian, and I did a tour a few years ago. I've been doing it for 20 years now, and I talk a bit about it on stage, but not about the catheterizing as much as the fact that, I've not got a belly button, for example. So I talk about my no belly button, no navel, tummy button, whatever you want to call it. And I've used that as a talking point at a few stand-up shows and things, and that's been kind of fun, and having a little routine about that. So I did a whole show a few years ago called Navelless Gazing, all about my bladder stuff. But I found what was interesting at that is I thought I'm going to out myself. As a stand-up comedian, you do Edinburgh Festival or these other shows, and you want an angle. And it's quite common at the minute to have an angle which is, people talk about mental health or new angles on, wider stories that aren't just jokes. So I thought, I'm going to out myself as a catheter user. I'm going to use this show to put a flag in the ground and sort of reclaim, this stuff and say, I'm here as a catheter user. It's a hidden disability, and I'm proud to say this is me. And it was a mixed response, I think it's fair to say. It really felt like the audience weren't completely ready for it. I had some people on the way out thanking me, saying, who were in healthcare, or saying, my uncle has a bladder cancer, or my aunt has urological issues, or whatever, or my cousin has a stoma. Great, you're talking about these things. Get it out there. Do this more. But I had another few people on the way out who would just go, "Ooh, that was a bit much. The catheter thing was. I couldn't quite. That was a little much for me." And you think it's odd that I've heard stand-up comedians for the last 20 years do the most outrageous material that's just there to shock, and audiences then don't walk out saying, "Oh, that was too much." They'll hear the most crazy X-rated jokes and just walk out and go, "Ah, well, shrug it off, it's stand-up comedy." But as soon as you mention putting a catheter inside you to urinate, suddenly it's like, that's a little, that goes over the line, surely. And I think sometimes you look at the audience and think, oh, come on, at least that's true. At least that's part of my biographical, and we're doing a good thing, I think. You've got to shout about the, if you can talk about, it does feel like it's the last taboo in some areas, the other healthcare issues. And I've seen some great stand-up comedy shows talking about, coming through cancer and heart problems and mental health and depression and suicide, all these sorts of things. But yeah, bladder though, it's tricky, isn't it? Tricky to talk about it in a way that society's ready for yet. I don't know. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it just makes some people just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's just part of how your body works. It shouldn't be uncomfortable to talk about.
We all do it, don't we? It's just how you do it, really. So, but that's why I'm, as I say, it's great that you're doing this podcast, because, I think sometimes you've got to, maybe you have to make people uncomfortable a bit to sort of be able to talk about these things. Because we know by now, I think, that not talking about things is not healthy, really.
It doesn't make it any better or make it go away.
No, it doesn't help, and it just makes people, retreat and hide away and get through things on their own, which is not good. So I think we are hopefully realizing as a society that it's better to talk about things than not. So, got to keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are you still dealing with today? You say you go once a year now still for checkups and things like that, or?
Yeah, once a year, and that's it really. I go back and I have a kidney scan on both sides of the kidney and the bladder. They just check that I'm voiding the bladder okay. They seem to be happy with that last few years. I've had sort of the occasional twinges in kidneys and things, and keep sort of asking the question like, oh, is that okay, that little twinge there, if I'm really full, or don't empty in time, that sort of thing. And the scans come through fine. So I think there's, just that to keep an eye on, I suppose. And, as you get older, which I sort of now feel every passing day that I am, it's things about prostate, I suppose, and it's about, checking for cancers and things like that. So I'm not worried about, I don't have anxiety particularly about those things. I'm glad that I have my opportunity once a year to go in for a checkup, and they have a chance to just do the scans and tests and things. So I trust in the healthcare system and trust that the doctors know what they're doing and are looking for these sorts of things. And otherwise, I just sort of generally get on with life, work hard, enjoy time with the, bit of travel and where possible, things like that, and just let the bladder stuff happen when the bladder stuff happens.
That's amazing. So you're pretty much just living life.
Trying to, but I'm well aware. I've when I've had the health stuff in the past, it's not just bladder as well. I've had 2 corneal transplants, so I'm wearing someone else's corneas right now. As in terms of organ donation, I'm a advocate for that because I've benefited from that. I can see better because of someone's gift of that. So I'm well aware that you're only ever, you don't know what's around the corner, you don't know what the next health thing is. So I'm grateful when things are going great, and I'm ready to deal with stuff when it's not. I suppose that's it. I'm philosophical about it. I'm not sort of coasting along, fingers and ears, going la la la, everything's fine. Aren't I lucky? Isn't it all going well? I am lucky, but I'm well aware that we all have little turns, so we'll cross that bridge when it happens, I suppose.
Yeah. That's a nice little balance that you have right now then.
Trying. But it feels busy at the minute. I think also because with the stand-up comedy, I lost a lot of my work in the pandemic, and that's starting to come back now. I do a lot of writing as well, a lot of stuff with the BBC, and it's a busy time work-wise. I'm making it busy by grabbing lots of work when I can, because I know it's a freelance issue that suddenly the work goes again. So I'm kind of a busy freelancer there. My kids are 9 and 11, so they're sort of they're great age, that we've gone through those early years when it's all a bit mad, and teenage years around the corner. So we're sort of treasuring that sort of the time we have all together at the minute. We just had a holiday for the first time. We've just been away on vacation, I should say, for the first time in 3 years because of the pandemic. So it was good to travel again, and all those just making it all work, making life work where possible.
That's great. And I'm curious, since you mentioned you had that one show that you brought in, catheter using, have you found any other places with writing and just any type of freelance work that you do where you can bring in your medical experiences and
Good question, actually. Yeah, apart from, I've done a couple of things for like catheter companies or pharmaceutical things but that's slightly different. That's sort of a more corporate private event for their, pharmaceutical launches or whatever. But in terms of the mainstream stuff, I am still sort of, it's not my primary thing at the minute, but I have in the past, and I would love to again pitch and write. I do sitcom writing mainly, I suppose, and comedy writing generally. And I've pitched a few sitcoms. I pitched loads of sitcoms, but what I keep coming back to is some sort of medical sitcom about urology, about urological ward, about bladder conditions. I've tried one steer which was about a hospital, about a urological place, and was told, oh no, it's a bit icky. Fine, not that again. I tried a different idea which was a bit more of less of a sitcom, more of a comedy drama, I suppose, or a dramedy about a guy who's basically got the same condition, and a hidden urological condition. I don't think I was specific in the pitch, but I just want to do basically a rom-com, romantic comedy about a guy who's got a hidden bladder condition, and those issues about when you tell your romantic partner, or the issues that can hold you back, or your family know about it, your friends don't fully, because I think there are funny moments in that. I think you can laugh with it without laughing at it, and all of those sorts of things help you get through it, I suppose, in a way. So one day I mean to sort of sit down and just write that script, whether it's a film script or a TV show, and just try and pitch that around. For now, I've tried it pitching just a couple of A4 pages, and to no avail yet. But it would be nice to get something out there in the mainstream along those lines, especially because certainly in Britain at the minute, the BBC does seem to be eager for those topics on mental health, and just stories that show that we're not all right. So it'd be nice to get that going if I could.
Yeah, I think they would be surprised with how many viewers they would actually be reaching. I think there's a large community of us that would love to see something like that we can relate to.
Yeah, I was seeing only today on BBC News, Breakfast News on the BBC, they had a story about a 7-year-old girl who's got a stoma, and she's got a teddy bear with the stoma as well, and she's only 7, but she wants to be an advocate for, hey, we should talk about these things. And of course she's 7, that will change, I'm sure, and a few weeks ago they had a sportswoman as well who also has a stoma and goes to these things. So there's a lot more of that, and I've seen it more on the news, little features on the news and things, and the occasional longer form documentary. I've not seen it yet in a sort of entertainment capacity in a drama or a comedy. I think the nearest I remember, the only one I can remember was, have you seen The Green Mile, the Tom Hanks Stephen King film? Because in that, Tom Hanks has a bladder condition, I think, not an ongoing one, not a congenital one or a lifelong thing, but I think he has cystitis or something, and then he's healed by the prisoner who puts his hands near him, and suddenly his bladder clears up. And I remember watching that in the cinema going, there, we're on screen, finally bladder's get a mention, so that's nice. More of that, please.
Yeah, well, if you pitch something and it gets picked up, definitely let us know. I'll talk about it on the show, and
let's make it happen.
Yeah,
too right. Well, there's a surprising number. Didn't they do this survey? I think you've mentioned it before. I think Kirstine mentioned it on her episode, that there's this study they did about people who have this condition, bladder exstrophy and bladder conditions, as a child, and something stupid like a third of them go into entertainment or something like that. It's like a third go into healthcare, a third. I mean, these figures are gross exaggerated, I'm sure, but a really big chunk go into entertainment. And I know with exstrophy, what is it, 1 in 100,000 births or something. I could probably list 80 people that I know with exstrophy if I really thought about it. But of those, I know 2 comedians, a cartoonist, a professional clown, another writer. So it's just, there are people who just want to just cheer people up. You get a condition like this, you're in hospital as a child, and you think, I'm going to go into healthcare and heal people, or I'm just trying to cheer people up, and I think also essentially do a job you love. If you have those hospital run-ins early on, rather than necessarily have a job you don't enjoy, think, well, let's just enjoy ourselves and hopefully cheer others along as they go. But so maybe, if there's a few of us who are wanting to do this sort of entertainment style job, we could club together. We could maybe write and create this worldwide, global, transatlantic smash hit show of. That
could be really cool.
This would be nice.
The whole staff writers are all bladder exstrophy people. That would be really cool.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't that be amazing? Yes, definitely. I'm all for it.
Well, I think that was mostly it for all of my questions. Do you have anything else that you want to add, or any fun stories you want to share or anything?
I had nothing else. It's funny, I had nothing else to add, but since you said fun stories, I'm thinking fun stories. Well, there is one that I was thinking about. Basically, I as I've gone on, I've become less. As a young adult, I was worried all the time about what will people think. I suppose partly maybe it's having kids. Once you walk around a supermarket with baby sick on your shoulder. I no longer care anymore, And in fact, I want now to be found out. I leave catheters on tables. Like, I hope this starts a conversation, I remember going to an airport once and seeing in the bin of the gents' toilet, there was a catheter just left there in the bin. I thought, brilliant, someone who's just been in here is a catheter user. There's more of us out there. Wonderful. But that said, I worked on a TV show, and I don't think I've talked about this publicly, so I don't know if I should, but we're here now. I worked on Top Gear, the motor show, and I only worked on one series of it. It was when the regular hosts left, because Jeremy Clarkson, the regular host, punched a producer because he didn't get a steak dinner. And that's all a true story. That's in the papers. Everyone can read that bit. But I knew one of the new hosts, Chris Evans. I knew him from radio, and he said, do you want to come and write for Top Gear? So I went, yeah, of course I do. I'm not a mad car person, but I wanted the work, and it's a massive BBC show. So I got to work with Matt LeBlanc, who's Joey and Friends, and he was one of the hosts. And I thought, this is brilliant. But we used to write the episodes, plan the show from Chris Evans's house, and he's a very successful broadcaster. And excuse me, bashing the microphone here. Very successful broadcaster. And very fancy house, and you go and work there, and he'd come straight from his breakfast. He used to have this very big breakfast show, biggest radio show I think in the country at the time. And we'd meet at his house. In fact, I think I had the key even. Meet at his house, but a bit nervous, thinking he's going to come straight from the radio show. We've got to plan the show, big TV show, millions of viewers, Joey from Friends, etc. And we all nervously then went to the loo, me and the other producers, the other writers. And I remember coming back from the toilet at Chris's house, and I put my catheter, because you can't put a catheter in a bin at someone else's house, let alone a celebrity's house. That's not the done thing. Take your catheters home with you, surely. Put it in my back pocket. And then Chris arrived, and then Matt LeBlanc arrived. And we're all sitting around on the sofas, and I remember feeling my back pocket and suddenly realising that I had the packet, but I remember thinking, I can't feel the catheter. Where's that gone? And I'm looking across the floor going, oh, the toilet's over there, and I know I didn't leave it in the toilet. And I looked across the floor, and I could see shining on the very plush, very expensive carpet was my used catheter that had clearly fallen out of my pocket in the rush between the toilet and the sofa. And there's like 12 of us, high-flying execs, and Matt LeBlanc and Chris Evans planning the show, and I still to this day have no idea if any of them noticed that there was a shimmering on the floor, a used catheter. I made an excuse and went over and just get another cup of tea, picked it up, put it in the pocket, and I like to think that I was discreet enough that no one noticed, but I will always know that right next to Matt LeBlanc there was there on the floor a used catheter. So there you go.
That's pretty great.
That's that was one of those, could I be any more embarrassed? Yes, I could. But there you are.
Nice Chandler.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, wrong guy, I know. Yeah, exactly. How are you doing? That's what it would have been, wouldn't it? But there you are. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
Weird.
I think we all have the... Sorry, go ahead.
When you get this thing, you get embarrassing stories, don't you? That's what generally, as long as you can then own it and go, oh well, on we go. This is it. The embarrassing stories will always come, won't they, when you're involved with bladder-based issues? Oh
yes, I was just gonna say essentially the same thing. I'm sure we all have stories like that.
Exactly. I want to know yours now. Maybe that's a whole different episode. Maybe you need to be interviewed yourself.
Yeah, I want to kind of have like I guess it's a trend where it's the ask me anything type thing.
Yes. Yes. That's what you need.
Yeah. I think I'll do that at some point.
We'll wait. We'll wait. You've got to tease the listener by yes, let them come back for that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it so much.
No worries. Thank you for having me. Great to chat, and wish you well in the podcast and all you're doing.
Thank you. And let me know if your TV show or movie ever gets picked up.
Yeah. One day. We'll get there. One day.
All right. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Paul. I did want to define one term for you all before the end here. Peritonitis is the inflammation of the peritoneum, which is a silk-like membrane that lines your inner abdominal wall and covers the organs within your abdomen. Now, there are two kinds of peritonitis. There's spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, and then there is secondary peritonitis that can be caused by a rupture of some kind, such as a bladder rupture in Paul's case. Peritonitis does require prompt medical attention, and left untreated, it can lead to several different types of infection and sometimes life-threatening infections throughout the entire body. As always, the sources for this will be linked in the show notes as well. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Body Talk with Becks. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts at. Also, consider becoming a patron on patreon.com and maybe pick up a sticker to represent the show somewhere. And if you would like to share your story or know someone who would like to, I can be contacted through my website, www.bodytalkwithbecks.com, or on social media. Thanks for listening.